Yeshua came proclaiming a kingdom. Was that something new? A new revolution to enable him to become the king? Because the wise men had declared a king would be born in Bethlehem. Or did this kingdom exist before time began, in a place beyond this world and its limited dimensions, where the will of the Father was and is continuously being carried out? The order of the kingdom is governed by obedient servants whose only existence is to worship the King day and night. Day and night they cry, "Holy, holy, 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 holy is Yahweh Almighty." Day and night, the order of the King is being carried out. The prophet Isaiah was privileged, and we heard this earlier, to see something one day. And he was taken into the heavenly dwelling of Almighty Yahweh and was overwhelmed with what he saw there. And he said, "Woe is me! I am ruined! For I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell among a people of unclean lips. And my eyes, they have seen the King, Yahweh Almighty." The prophet acknowledges the King and recognizes his heavenly dwelling where the kingdom is. And then he's absolutely astonished that he remained alive after that experience. I say no, the kingdom existed. And I want to suggest to you today that the kingdom Yeshua proclaimed at the outset of his ministry had its existence in eternity. There was no need for a parliament to sit and discuss that. It was already in the DNA, the fabric, the essence of the King, Yahweh Almighty, already in eternity, outside of this sphere, time, outside of creation, already in existence. The reality of a functioning kingdom in our world, this world, the earth, had to take shape. And it began after the fall, when man sinned, with the creation of a people, formed through covenant, Exodus 19, 5-6. The kingdom was based on a covenant of love, Deuteronomy 7, 6-9, that continues into eternity. So today, I'm going to take you on a journey of the greatest love story that ever existed. And it starts with that Yahweh had a plan, and that Yahweh desired a people. You know, to desire somebody, it is to crave that person. It's to long for them. And when a person desires someone, their sense of longing is excited by the enjoyment or the thought of that person. And they want to take action to obtain the goal. So Yahweh set about his plan to demonstrate to the people that he desired who he was. And he started by showing them that little flies, 1 billion times over, can affect the world. And then he started with some frogs that started jumping all over the place. And he started to show this people who he was. Then he sent darkness in the middle of the day and did all kinds of amazing things. You see, he wanted to show his courting, his aspire to get to know the woman or the man or the nation who he was. I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine. He brought them out of Egypt with a strong arm and a hand, and they considered themselves to be so small, like little grasshoppers. Have you seen a grasshopper? Tiny little things. And we saw the Nephilim there, and the descendants of Anak, and we seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked, and we looked like them we looked the same to them. You see, they considered themselves the tiniest little people. But Yahweh set about changing their outlook and their vision. You see, they were no longer to be slaves to Pharaoh. They would start to date, dare I say, date the God of Israel. They were no longer to be downtrodden. They were no longer to be considered as nothing. They were no longer to be small and insignificant, because now they were discovering who Yahweh was. My beloved spoke and said to me, "Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, come with me. See, the winter is past. The winter of Egypt has passed. The rains are over and gone." See, Yahweh showed them who he was. And in that, he also needed to demonstrate some other things to this people that didn't quite know who Yahweh was. He spoke over them words that came from the Almighty. Now let's think about this. In the beginning, the words of the Almighty said, "Let there be," and everything came into being. It was the words of the Almighty. And in today's 21st century, when we think about people who come and sit with counseling, we call that psychotherapy. Yahweh, the God of heaven, became their psychotherapist, the healer of emotional and mental conditions of the past. That's what a psychotherapist is. And so Yahweh says to his people, "You were the fewest of all the people, yet I handpicked you out of the fewest of the people, and the whole earth is mine," Yahweh says, "yet you are mine. You are my treasured possession." And the psalmist goes on to express, he says, "Oh, when I consider the heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you've made and you've set in place, oh, what is mankind that you are mindful of him?" You see, Yahweh spoke over them words of healing. Yahweh spoke over them words of restoration. Yahweh spoke over them words of encouragement. Yahweh spoke over them words of elevation, because now they were to be a part of the God of Israel. We should not We dare not underestimate the words of Yahweh that come to us, because they are sent for a purpose. Let there be. This will happen. And Yahweh can speak to heal. Yahweh can speak to deliver. Yahweh can speak. They were beginning to understand who this God was, not only just by looking at the demonstration of 10 plagues. No, because now Yahweh is seeking to woo his bride to come to be with himself. Yahweh chose to come into covenant relationship with a people. And you know, when we think of the celebrities, let me just take you off a little bit. If you think of the celebrities, if we think of Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, you know, they're well-known people of the celebrity world. When they would have sat down to discuss their prenuptial arrangement, Brad would have kept his 50 million and Angelina Jolie would have kept her 40 million, and that would have been the arrangement. They'd have come to some arrangement as to what they would get in case they split up. The unspoken prenuptial arrangement that Yahweh had with his people was that everything I have is yours. Everything who I am is yours. The unspoken agreement was unconditional love. Unconditional love. He brought me to the banqueting house, and his intention towards me was love. And his banner over me was love. And at Sinai, they came into a marriage ceremony with the God of heaven. And Yahweh had finished his work of healing and his courting with this people. And they went into a wedding ceremony. How beautiful you are. How beautiful, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. And then the words of covenant came through from Yahweh, and he says, I belong to my beloved, and his desire is for me. You see, Israel regarded Yahweh as their king, and he was to dwell among them. When the tabernacle was set up in the wilderness, Yahweh was to dwell in and among his people, and his presence was above the mercy seat. And the Ark of the Covenant remained there. What was happening? But that Yahweh now, after he had taken covenant with his people, he was going to live among his people. So the two now lived together. They were to forget Egypt. They were to make a home with Yahweh. And when Israel settled in the promised land, Yahweh made David king over the earthly part of that kingdom. 1 Chronicles 17, 20-22. And he promised that one of his descendants would always sit on the throne. The Messiah to come would be the eternal king of that kingdom. They together were to rule together. Israel means ruling with El. So together now they are one. They've come out of Egypt, and Yahweh now covenanted to be with this people, to covenant to be with them, and they lived together. You see, some have assumed that Israel, as Yahweh's prized possession, has been replaced by the church due to their unfaithfulness. And this deception is widely circulated. This cannot be true. It cannot be true, because the scriptures show us that Yahweh's covenant with Israel is forever. Even though Israel frequently and undeservingly was unfaithful to Yahweh, Hosea 11, 1-9, Yahweh did not change his mind. He remained committed to his relationship with his people. He remained committed to the prenuptial agreement, which was love and love and more love and love. Didn't matter where they'd gone, didn't matter what they did, Yahweh remained the constant. Yahweh says, how beautiful you are. My darling, oh, how beautiful. You are altogether beautiful, my darling. There is no flaw in you. Israel, the apple of Yahweh's eye. Beautiful Israel. And we should be careful what we say about them and Yahweh's people. We should be careful how we consider them, Yahweh's people, because they're not small anymore. They are big because Yahweh is on their side, and they, if they choose to be, are joined together with Almighty Yahweh, and if you offend them, you offend Yahweh. We need to be careful. The twist to this little story that I'm trying to tell you is highlighted in a different way when we read of a verse that I found that struck me. In Exodus chapter 4, verse 22 to 23, we read, this is Yahweh. Thus, then say to Pharaoh, this is what Yahweh says. Israel is my firstborn son. Let my son go and worship me. So practically speaking, let's just think about this firstborn son. If a man has 5 sons, you would then split the inheritance into 6 portions. And the first son, everybody gets one, and the first son, he gets 2. Yeah? That's the portion that goes to the firstborn son. And let me just take you off a little bit. Do you remember Reuben, Israel? I'm going to call Israel and Jacob, they're interchanged, but I'm going to say Israel the man, so you know what I'm talking about. So Israel the man had 10 sons, didn't he? And Reuben was the eldest. He was by right due to get the double portion. But unfortunately, 12 sons, I beg your pardon. Yes, I'm going to come to that in a minute. Yeah, 12 sons, I beg your pardon. But Reuben, being the eldest, he defiled his father's bed, and that portion was given to Joseph. So when Israel the man was on his deathbed, he brought all of his 12 sons into his presence, and he was pronouncing blessings upon them. We read that in the scriptures. And when he came to Joseph, who was to get the double portion, he brought his 2 sons, his boys, Ephraim and Manasseh, which make up Israel's, the community. And when Israel, the man, was placing the blessing, he put his right hand over Ephraim. His right hand should have gone to Manasseh, but he placed his right hand over Ephraim and his left hand over Manasseh. No, have I said that wrong? Ephraim was the youngest, that's right, and Manasseh was the eldest, yes. And Joseph was displeased. No, Dad, that's not right. That's not right. The eldest son should get the blessing. And we heard yesterday that there was something about election that when Yahweh does stuff, he does stuff. And it's we can't understand it. We don't quite know what happens. But somehow the blessing was to remain on the youngest son, Ephraim, not Manasseh. Yahweh has a way of kind of changing things around. But it belongs to the firstborn, this blessing. The firstborn is the one who stands in the father's stead, and he carries his name. He perpetuates his memory forever. Here's another interesting thing that I found. A guy called Zelophehad had 5 righteous daughters who, when they came into the land of Canaan, they said, hang on a second. Just because we're girls doesn't mean that our father's estate shouldn't come to us. And they presented that to the priests. And the priests had a discussion and said, oh, yeah, that's true. So Zelophehad's 5 daughters inherited their father's estate. You see, when we come to the firstborn, when we come to Yahweh, it's not about the males and the females. No. It's about Yahweh's election. It's about who he chooses. The firstborn is male or female. Brothers, sorry. We're in there together. The firstborn is to be the heir to the king. All his kingdom, all his land, all his property, all his possessions. We are to be rightful successors of the king, the firstborn. Yahweh speaks to Israel, I belong to my beloved, and his desire is for me. Place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. You see, when we think about the firstborn, if we're wanting to inherit, we're wanting to have everything that Yahweh is. Yahweh says, everything that I have is yours. You know what? That's fine, but there are some duties that go with that. There are some responsibilities. You can have everything that belongs to Yahweh. You can have it because his commitment to us remains the same. It remains love. Love and more love. No matter what you do, it's love. But the foundation has already been laid. The firstborn, Israel, as we're talking now. And I want us to get this. And us, by extension, through Abraham, by faith. That's what the scriptures tell us. The firstborn, the heirs to the kingdom, the heirs to the king, comes to us through Abraham by faith. We read that in Romans chapter 11. Some of the branches have been cut off so that I can slip in and get in there and be one with Israel. But here's the thing with duties or expectations of the heir. They, Israel, and everyone that joins themselves to Israel by faith through Yeshua, we are meant to epitomize. What does that mean? Characterize, show, typify, represent the king of the kingdom. If we choose to sit alongside and say, yes, I am in covenant relationship with the God of Israel, we know his name to be Yahweh, then there is some responsibilities. We are to become regents. What are they? It's a person appointed to administer a state because the monarch is absent. Now, I'm not talking about Queen Elizabeth. The monarch who I'm referring to is the sovereign Yahweh, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He's absent here. And he's asking us to be representatives of the kingdom here in the earth. That's what he's asking of us. We want the heirs we want to ask Yahweh for anything we want. We want Yahweh to do this, and we want Yahweh to do that, and we want to do this. But there are responsibilities to heirs. There are responsibilities to each of us as subjects, as representatives, as ambassadors of the King of Kings. Israel were continuously unfaithful, and I dare to say we are not as close to Yahweh as we should be. I don't know if we've been prostituting ourselves away from Yahweh. I don't know that, but I'm just saying to you, that's what Israel did. But we cannot expect of Yahweh. We cannot expect him, why have you not answered me? Because you're not living right. We often say Yahweh is not answering my prayers. Look at your life, brothers and sisters, because the King says, everything that I have is yours. You can have healing, you can have deliverance, you can have mercy, you can have anything you want because it comes from me. That's who I am. You can have all of that. But there are some expectations. The requirements of regents are already, the requirements of ambassadors are already in existence. They are a part of the kingdom's DNA. And interestingly, these principles of the kingdom living, and we've been talking about that for now 2 or 3 years. We've talked about kingdom living. And I want to ask us, how far are we Are we nearer to Yahweh now, or are we still where we were when we spoke about that, 3 or 4 years ago? But I want to say to you, when the firstborn, let's get this, when the firstborn, the one and only, the begotten of the Father came to the earth, he said, I am representing my Father. And he said, everything I see my Father do, that's what I do. Everything I see him. I don't do anything that my Father does not ask me to do. And I haven't seen already. Wow. What about you and I? What about you and I? The book says we are to do certain things, and we ask ourselves, why should I do that? Because the book says so. The book tells us already. What's the need for discussion? What's the need for, I'm not sure, I haven't had my own personal revelation. But the book is already laid out for us. We too often want to query Yahweh. But I want to say to you today, I'm just going to say it. Do not expect of Yahweh things in your life if you are not living right. Don't do it. You cannot. You do not recognize who you are dealing with. The God of heaven, Yahweh is his name. He is holy. And I cannot expect of Yahweh just because I read it in here and live any old how. It doesn't work like that. You see, when Yeshua came, the firstborn, the begotten of the one, the begotten of the Father, what did he do? He elevated the kingdom living to another level. He looked at the Pharisees and said, no, don't look at them. Look at me. This is what I see my Father doing. And one day he just sat on a mountain and hundreds of people came to hear the words of the rabbi. the begotten one, the firstborn son of Yahweh. And I've just summarized this in just 3 little headings. Yeshua came talking about a culture. Let's think about culture, and I'm using the Caribbean because that's what I know. Their culture is about the food, yeah? It's about the music, yeah? It's about the social element. It's all right. Take it easy. Take it easy, no worry. Don't worry about a thing. But the kingdom culture says, yes, you should worry about some things. Because Yahweh says, I'm holy. He says, I'm holy. And I sometimes think we are so, I speak for me too, because I think sometimes we live in the 21st century and we think Yahweh is a God of mercy, Yahweh is the God of grace, and Yahweh is going to forgive us, and we're going to keep coming back to him, and he's going to keep forgiving us. But I say to you, holiness is what Yahweh requires of us. And the scriptures tell us, without sanctification, you will not see Yahweh. You will not. It doesn't matter how you pretend to do your thing, and you're standing up here and you're doing your thing. Without holiness, without sanctification, you will not get a look in. You will get to those gates and he will say, I didn't commit. I don't know you. Because we think we can do what we like, and it's not okay. It's not okay. At the beginning of the year in the Bulwell Fellowship, Nottingham North, I was ministering, and I said, I'm going to give everybody a tip for the beginning of 2018. And the tip was this. Where there is doubt, don't. So if you're not sure, if you think I can go to the pub, and you're not sure and you're umming and ahhing, then don't do it. Because there's doubt, you're not sure. If you think, oh, I'm okay to do that, but you're wrestling with that, don't do it. The other thing about the culture of the kingdom is this. It's about seeking first the kingdom. And I am tired of hearing us discuss the fact that we don't live in community anymore, and we've got a home to run, and we've got a husband to look after, and we've got a full-time job to do, and we've got this, that, and the other. I say that's okay, but I say to you, it's seeking first the kingdom of Yahweh, and everything else will fall into place. I believe that with all of my heart. My husband does not come to this church, but I put Yahweh first, and I'm trusting Yahweh with him and his life. You see, we don't put Yahweh first, we put him second. It's about me and my job and my house and my promotion and my things. But the culture of the kingdom is firstly Yahweh. Firstly Yahweh. Then everything else, I say to you, everything else will fall into place. We do not need to worry. We don't need to worry. But we can try that. You see, I know some of us have not put Yahweh first. I don't have time. I've got to do this. I can't. But I can tell you something. The people who put Yahweh first will be those people that get the 1 talent, and they will be added to their 10. And that 1 talent will not be, I don't want to say what's going to happen, but what I am saying is Yahweh, number 1. And the reason why Yahweh should be number 1 is because we love him with all of our hearts and with all of our souls and with all of our minds. And if we don't love Yahweh, that's when we struggle. That's when we don't want to put him first. We put him second. Oh, I don't mind making room for Yahweh in my life. I'm happy to be saved because maybe I'll get to heaven. But if you know something and you're not doing it, I'm not sure you're going to get to heaven, because to whom much is given, much is required. You know stuff, but you are not doing it because you deliberately choose not to. And that's not okay with the Master, because his kingdom will come. I'm coming to that. I don't want to step over here. That's the culture. What about the nature? And I'm just going to quickly run through this. On the mountain, on the Sermon on the Mount, Yeshua said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst." I was thinking about that statement, who hunger and thirst. You know, we were fasting a week or so ago. You know, at the end of the time, I was proper hungry. Once I was starving, I was proper hungry and I was thirsty. When was the last time I was so thirsty for Yahweh that I didn't get enough of him? I wanted him more than food itself. When was the last time I was so hungry for Yahweh that I was so thirsty for righteousness? You see, we're not, and I'm being real. We're not where we should be, brothers and sisters. We hunger and thirst for other things that are not of Yahweh. Blessed are the pure in heart. Who's pure in heart? Blessed are those peacemakers. This is the nature of the kingdom. Poor in spirit. If we're humble, when we're humble, we don't mind people walking all over us, but we do. We just get cross, don't we? We think, who do you think you are? That's not poor in spirit, because pride rises up and we want to get vengeance and we want to sort things out. This is what Yeshua said these things. Sat down on the mountain and was just telling them, this is my Father's kingdom. And there's rules and regulations, and I'm just going to touch on this and say, same sermon, Yeshua said, "You are the salt of the earth." And I ask myself, and Yeshua says, if the salt loses its flavor, how can it be seasoned? If we, brothers and sisters, are the salt of the earth, if we lose our seasoning, how in heaven's name is the world going to come to know Yeshua? Yeshua went on to say, "You are the light of the world." If our light is distinguished, then the world remains in darkness. These are heavy responsibilities for us, brothers and sisters. But they're of the kingdom. They're of the King. Yeshua goes on to remind us of the kingdom's DNA, the fruit that should be in my life, evident in subjects, obedient subjects, the heart of the King. Awake, north wind, and come, south wind, blow on my garden, that its fragrance may spread everywhere. Let my beloved come into his garden and taste its choice fruits. Do not let Yeshua come by your garden and find no figs on the tree, because he's looking for fruit in our lives. I'm just going to conclude with, I've called it the kingdom's motto. And the motto is a short sentence or phrase chosen to encapsulate the beliefs and ideals of individuals, families, or institutions. or an institution. And it's reflected in the request of the disciples when they said to Yeshua, teach us to pray. And Yeshua led them in the most powerful prayer that ever existed. And he orchestrated the words to fit the purpose of the King, to enable us to align our thinking and our actions to what Yahweh's purpose and plan for us is. He said, this then is how you should pray. This is from Luke. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. These were the words that Yeshua taught his disciples. It was by no coincidence that he taught them to pray this way, because somehow he wanted the subjects of the king to come in line with the kingdom that's already in existence, where the will of the Father is continuously being carried out every single day. So of course he orchestrated the words, let your will be done here, among us, in me, as it is in heaven. Right now, Yeshua's kingdom does not reign on the earth as it does in heaven. Yet Yahweh's kingdom is intended to and will take over all the kingdoms of this world. And we get a glimpse of this through the prophet Daniel, and he says, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was one like the Son of Man, come in with the clouds of heaven. And he approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and people and every language worshipped him. The will of the Father was being carried out in heaven. His dominion is everlasting. It is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. You see, the kingdom, the foundation of the kingdom, it exists in eternity. It's outside of time and creation. And let me say something, it will last forever. It will last forever. Where Yahweh is and his spirit is active. I say where Yahweh is and his spirit is active, there we find the kingdom. There. So when we are in this space, this is the kingdom. When we are worshiping and we're in the zone and we're so Yahweh is number one. That's where the kingdom is. The truth is, this desire must be realized on earth in the same way as it is manifested in heaven. In the kingdom, the will of the king is done. There is no debate. You know, you're not going to get the angels saying, I'm not going to say holy today. I've had enough. The will of the king is carried out all the time. The one time when somebody said that they weren't going to abide by the kingdom rules, he got kicked out of heaven and came here to cause us trouble. He said, I will do this and I will do that. Not here, you won't. Off. Yahweh's will for us is that we change from humans with natural human actions and ways of thinking, which are not in harmony with Yahweh's laws, to people who think and act like Yahweh. David Mayer said that. And my love story is coming to an end, but it actually is unending. Come away, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or like a young stag on the spice-laden mountains. Come away with me. into eternity. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed.